how to make a basic cider from start to finish. So a couple years ago, we made a basic cider and we added sugar to it. So that makes it not really a cider and more like a wine, depending on your definition of wines and ciders. So I thought, you know what? It's time. It's 2021. Let's make a new basic cider video. So here we go. Here's what we're gonna need to make this apple cider. First, we need apple juice. About a gallon. You need a 1 gallon fermenter. That can be a wide mouth or a closed mouth. I'm using a narrow mouth today. Yeast, I'm using Safale SO4, but you can use pretty much anything, even bread yeast. That's right, you can make this with bread yeast. I'm using a half packet of yeast. If you're using anything that doesn't come in a packet, you want about a teaspoon. A bung and an airlock, and then some optional things that are nice to have is a hydrometer and a graduated cylinder. Now, before I get too far, let me give a couple of explanations. I said you can use pretty much any yeast, and there's a good reason. This should only probably come out to anywhere from a 6 to 7 or maybe even 8% ABV in the end. Almost any yeast on the market can do that, even bread yeast. Believe it or not, it'll go to like 11% in most of our experiences with it. But Safale SO4 is an ale yeast. It's made to go to like 11, maybe 12%, so it's perfect for this. Also, your apple juice. You don't just use any old apple juice. Fresh squeezed is absolutely best if you can get the right kind of apple for that, which is usually crab apples, believe it or not. But any apple that you like, you can make cider from with varying degrees of taste success, okay? This happens to be just apple juice from the store. Really, really simple. Can you use apple cider if you're in the US? Yeah, it's just cloudy juice. There's really no difference when it comes to fermenting. They are essentially the same thing, so I'm gonna call it juice, whether you're using cider or juice. And cider is a finished product, though in the US it's hard cider. Don't get me started. We're just gonna call it cider. Things to look for in your juice. You want the most basic of ingredients. Ours is apple juice and ascorbic acid. In parentheses, it says vitamin C. That is there simply to preserve the color, and there's very little of it. You want nothing that I like to call ites and eights, things that end in those words, because those are preservatives. Now, you also want real apple juice. There are apple juices out there that are filled with various other kinds of juices, probably not going to make the best apple cider. They might make something wonderful, but it won't be apple cider. So if you really want to make cider, get real apple juice. Apple concentrate works also, but that's a whole other thing. Not getting into it for the scope of this video. Something else I probably should have mentioned is a funnel. They're always a really good thing to have. They make your life much, much easier. First step in any fermentation is sanitization. And we actually have a big bucket over there called turbos, where we keep sanitizer liquid. We are using a mixture of water and star sand according to the manufacturer's instructions, and everything was just cleaned and washed using soap and water first, and then we put them into the star sand for, a few minutes, and then let them drip dry right here on the table. That way, it keeps out all the bugs and infections that you really don't want in your brew. So the first thing I want to do is get my apple juice into the fermenter. And I know someone's going to ask, can I ferment in the jug? Well, while you can, it's not necessarily the best way. So my idea is, there's some juices that come with one of these. I think this is actually one of them that came with apple juice in it. Get that kind of juice. That way you get a free fermenter along with it. Or you could look at it this way. You buy the fermenter and get free juice. However you like to see it. Something I'd like to point out is as I'm pouring this, you're seeing foam build up inside there. That's a good thing. I am aerating this must. That's another reason to not just do it in the container it came in, because adding oxygen in the beginning phase of fermentation is a good thing for your yeast. It'll help them to build a really strong colony and prevents sulfury, eggy smells later on. We do want to be very careful with how far up this we go, because see this foam that's in here now, the fermentation itself will actually create some foam on its own, and it could go up into the airlock, which could be bad, but that just means you need to use a blow-off tube, which is a whole other video. Remember when I was talking about aerating? I'm going to drive that point home a little more. What I'm going to do is use a completely solid stopper here. I call it my thumb saver bung for reasons that will soon be explained. I stick it in there and I give this a shake. What I want to do is introduce more oxygen into that must, into that juice. I really want to get air in there. It's a good thing for fermentation. And I use the thumb saver bung because with a hole in there, pushing so hard against it while you're shaking can actually start to hurt just a little bit. Maybe I have delicate thumbs, I don't know. But it seems to work for me. People do this all sorts of ways. They use air stones and things like that. I have found through research that they don't make that much difference, and Airstone really doesn't help tremendously so. So don't get too crazy about it. You want to shake it up a little and get some in there. That's the gist. Then comes your yeast. Now, there's a lot of ways to see this. This packet here does 5 gallons, okay? So it can do 5 of these. I used to actually use like a fifth of it and try to gauge it, but was I a fifth? Was I a little lower? That gets a little bit scary. So now, I normally do a whole packet, but I know this is going to be very low gravity. More on gravity in just a second, but I know it's going to be low enough that I don't really have to worry about it. These yeast aren't going to work that hard to make this, so I'm just going to use half a packet, and I'm going to eyeball that. But Safeale makes these plastic packets, so I got to grab my MacGyver knife here and open it up. You do have one of these, right? I didn't put it on the list of things that you need, but I might have to because, you know, they're good to have. I'm just going to dump in about half. It's not that critical because, like we said, this whole packet can do 5 gallons. So, you know, if I'm a little bit off, so what? The rest of this, I'm going to fold up, put a piece of tape on, and stick it in the fridge. Keep them in your fridge. They will last a long, long time. Now I want to get that yeast in there a little bit. I'm just going to swirl this up a touch. If I do a full-on shake, I'm likely to get some up the sides, and it'll just stick there, and it'll never get to do its job. So just a little bit of a swirl to get it in there is all it really needs. You don't have to mix it. Those yeast will find a way, trust me. Next, we want to take a reading. And now this is a hydrometer reading. Just it's a glass tube with gradations on the side to measure the density of a liquid, which will tell us how much sugars we have in here and our potential alcohol. Now, the question comes up a lot, should I take the reading before or after I add the yeast? In all honesty, it doesn't make a difference. As long as you do it after adding the yeast, not too long after adding the yeast, because they are going to get to work and they may start creating some alcohol. So if you wait like, you know, a week and then take a reading, that reading isn't going to be worth anything. But if you do it within, you know, a few seconds or a few minutes, probably not much of an issue. So I think that's where that idea comes from. And just like most apple juices, they usually fall between 1.050 and 1.055 gravity. This one is 1.052 specific gravity, which, if you don't understand any of that, we do have some videos on explaining ABV and how to calculate it, things like that. They'll be linked in the description of this video. But just suffice to say that a 1.052 original gravity, if that fermented out to fully dry, which it probably will, comes out to about 7% ABV. Pretty respectable for a cider, right? Since most of them range between 3 and 6%, so this is a little bit strong. Could have even diluted it just a touch if you really wanted to make it go a little further. But that's a whole other video. What I'm going to do next is pour this back in. Some people don't do this. I am not some people. The reason why is everything has been sanitized, so I'm not worried about it. There's nothing wrong with this. If I didn't sanitize my graduated cylinder or my hydrometer, then it might be a problem, and you could be introducing harmful bacteria that could ruin your brew. And I'm not even kidding. They could make it taste really awful or turn it into vinegar. You don't want that. Trust me. Next thing we want to do is seal this up. Now, we don't want to seal it. What we want to do is make a one-way valve, so to speak. So that's where a bung and airlock comes in. The bung holds the airlock in place, obviously, and the airlock works like the S-trap in your sink. Gases come up and go down and out. They get through the liquid, which that liquid is sanitizer fluid, by the way, the same stuff we use in our sanitizer bucket. You can also use like cheap liquor or alcohol. I use Scoresby Scotch because I happen to have a bottle of it laying around for whatever reason from years and years ago. But you do not want to use plain water because bugs can actually swim through that and can get in here. When I say bugs, I mean like fruit flies. They really love going after fermentations. The smell of the CO2 and things like that really attract them. So be very, very careful with that. Sanitization is key. One very important thing you always want to do when you're making a fermentation, no matter how many times you've done it, is take some notes. So I'm going to make a label for this one. I'm calling it Basic Cider. The things that go on this label are today's date, which is November 16th, 2021. It's apple juice, so it's Publix apple juice, by the way, for those of you that know what Publix is. It also has Safeale SO4 yeast, half a packet, and our original gravity was 1.052. That's it for this one, and I don't stand on much pomp and circumstance here when it comes to these kind of labels, because we tend to make a lot of brews, so you know, good old masking tape and recycled paper, stuff that we printed one side on already, works for me. You know, rather than throwing it away or shredding it, just reuse it. And I just stick that right on there. And there you have it. So this is gonna go sit for a little while until it starts up, and I will come back and show you how it's doing. All right, so here we are about 24 hours in. This actually started in just a few hours, but you know, we decided to give it a full day. It's now in a fully active fermentation. And as you can see, there is
bubbles in the airlock. We have good bubble airlock activity. If you travel farther down, you see there is a small layer where the bubbles are starting to create a little tiny foam layer, but this is nothing at all remotely something to worry about because there's plenty of room that it's not going to get into our airlock. But more importantly, that little tiny foam layer is created by all these little tiny bubbles that are zooming up the side, and that is one of the telltale signs that we know we have a good active fermentation going.
All right, so I'm just going to give this a swirl and see how it goes. Oh. Now the swirl, at this point, all it does is gets everything back into solution, and it pushes out some of the CO2. You can do it a little bit more if you want to. That's fine. No harm done. Just the more you do it, the more gas is going to come out, that kind of thing. So expect to see more airlock activity. It can actually help fermentation along.
Now, when Brian did the swirl, all the stuff that had already started to settle out to the bottom is now being reincorporated into the must. And so if you're doing this at home, you may see chunks of white looking material. That is just yeast and other sediment that has come out of your fermentation. That is nothing to worry about and absolutely normal.
This is just going to sit for probably about a week. Usually ciders of this kind of gravity don't take super long, and we'll be back with the next part.
So this is some of what's going on inside the apple cider. People ask all the time about all the white stuff at the bottom. This is a little bit crazy. It looks like it's alive. But yeah, that's pretty normal. It's just sediment getting filled up with CO2, lifting up, breaking apart, doing its thing.
All right, so a couple of weeks has gone by, probably longer than I really would have liked, but hey, you know what? Life gets in the way. Just proving it's okay to let them sit. Our final reading is 0.998, giving us a 7.3% ABV for our cider. Pretty respectable. So today we're going to rack this because it's ready. There's some sediment in the bottom. We just want to get it off of all that and move forward. So as I was checking this and we were racking, I noticed this is very gassy. There's a lot of CO2 in here. That's not to be confused with carbonation. Even though technically it is carbonated, that's kind of nasty tasting gases. They're from full-on fermentation, not going to be the best tasting thing. So I want to degas. And for that, I need my spoon of unusual size. All right, and all I do is I put in the spoon and I stir this around. Now this is very full.
You also want to be careful not to hit your microphone.
Yeah, I'm gonna move this because there's a microphone right there and I don't want to hit it. And this is all I do. I just stir it up. I break the pattern a little bit. This is very full, so I have to be a little careful. But there is some bubbles coming out. You might even be able to see them. People always ask, how long do you degas? As long as you feel like doing it. I mean, technically you want to go until you don't see bubbles coming up anymore, but that could take days. So, I mean, I hate to give you a non-technical answer, but that's the truth. I just go till I feel comfortable that I've gotten enough out to not really be an issue anymore. In this case, it's probably going to be 5 or 10 minutes. So I'm going to spare you the gory details of watching me stir a brew for 5 or 10 minutes. And once it's degassed, I'm just going to put a lid and an airlock back on it because this is going to go sit on the storage fermentation shelf, the fermentation station, whatever you want to call it, for probably another week or so.
So at this point, just make sure you take notes of what you did, and then we'll see you when we're ready for the next step.
Okay, we racked this 5 days ago, and today it's cleared out, as you can see, and there's just a tiny bit of sediment at the bottom. So we're gonna rack it to a pitcher, that way we can know how many bottles we need, and we don't get some of that sediment in our bottles, and we're gonna put it in bottles.
Alright, so we have finished racking, as you can tell by here, and there was very little left, as you can tell by here. And while we were doing this, I noticed little tiny bubbles floating to the top, which means...
Degassing. So, sanitized spoon at the ready. I'm gonna degas. A lot of time, if you let it sit, you don't need to. It's just not, the gases come out on their own. Yeah. This has actually sat for a couple weeks, so much of it has come out. So because we used our fancy schmancy pitcher with the raised numbers on the side, I know we have 126 ounces, which comes to just about a full gallon, which is like 5 750 ml bottles minus 2 ounces. That last one will be our taster and it'll get drank quickly. We have plans for the other 4 bottles to be released in a separate video. But anyway, we are going to now put our bottling wand on the end of our autosiphon and bottle these up. We have videos on how to bottle, and they'll be linked below and maybe in a card up here. So if you're unsure of that topic, you can go look those up too.
Ta-da!
Now, something really cool about this is usually when you make a 1 gallon batch, you end up with like 4 bottles. We have almost 5. If you look, this one's just a little bit lower than the rest. Really, really cool, and that's kind of awesome. And that's one advantage to not using whole fruit. So there's kind of always that, give and take if you use juices versus using whole fruit. But in this case, it actually worked to our advantage. So this will be our taster, and then like I said, these other 4, we have plans. But for now, these are gonna go out of the way so we can do our tasting.
All right, so I'm actually pretty impressed with this. I'm impressed about the little bit of loss that we had because we almost came up to exactly a gallon, so go team. I'm impressed about how clear it is. It is super crystal clear. I am impressed that this only took 3 weeks. No.
Well,
3 weeks or 3 months?
3 weeks. It's
Okay.
3 weeks. Yeah, we started on November 16th. Today is December 6th, so it's about 3 weeks.
Time. We're in that nebulous thing where what day it is? Who am I? I don't know. I don't care because I'm going to get to drink some cider now.
This came out to 0.998 at 7.3% ABV, so it is very, very dry. It's also very, very young. In my experience, ciders that are very, very young and very, very dry tend to not taste very good initially. So this is an initial taste test, and we'll go from there.
I'm getting some of the unpleasant aroma, but I'm also getting apple, so...
Yeah, this doesn't smell as unpleasant as some.
Yeah, and for its age, and because of our expectations with brewing with apples...
Different juices will do different things.
Yeah.
We used a really good quality juice from
far,
Publix, so...
So good.
Yeah, so I'm going to just taste it. Wow. That's actually not horrible.
It is super dry, so up front,
Oh, yeah.
I'm getting that tart, acidic profile in my mouth.
Yes, definitely has a... Exactly. I get almost like a cookie on the exhale. Like a biscuity kind of thing. That's pretty cool. I don't think I've ever gotten that from a cider before.
Yeah, once I've got accustomed to that and I drank some more, more of the juicy apple flavors are coming through.
Yeah, green apple. It doesn't come across as red apple. It comes across as green to me.
Right.
This is probably the best young cider I've ever had. I just have to say that.
Based on its youth, based on its ending gravity, and based on its ABV, I would say that makes this really good. Now, if I critique this on its own, I feel like it's kind of watery. It doesn't have a very
low ABV.
unctuous smell. Mm-hmm. That's why I prefaced everything with all those parameters. So within those parameters, go team.
Interestingly enough, I could drink this now.
Yeah.
Now this is borderline on a wine. The reason why I wouldn't say it's wine is because I didn't add any extra sugars to it. But wines tend to start at around 8%. This is just a little bit below there. I like it. I'm having more.
It's a very easy thing to drink.
And this is just room temperature, stilled.
Yep.
If this was cold, this would be lovely.
Yeah.
If it was carbonated, I think this would be even better. And, we just might be trying that.
Spoilers.
Stay tuned.
I know this is weird, but it kind of reminds me of beer.
Yes, very much so.
And
ciders are like that.
Yeah.
They can very much remind you of a beer.
It's in my head.
That's not a bad thing. I mean, we're not huge beer people, but we like beer enough that, we can appreciate that. If I was going to just give a score on based like the way Derica did, where we know this is so young, we know this is like a 9, okay?
Yeah.
But that's not really where it is. That's just like based off of other ciders that I've had that were young and this and that. That's not where we're going with that. So I pretty much have a number ready.
Our true numbers are going to be much harsher. So this is our enjoyment of this beverage in comparison to all the beverages throughout the nation and the world and the universe.
Well, the ones that we've tried.
At least the ones we've experienced. So, do you have a number?
I think so. I'm ready.
I'm waffling on my number, just
I am too.
So you're aware. I'm going to count.
Oh, you're going to count. Okay.
1, 2, 3,
6.
6.5.
I was lower. I mean, to me, it's something I would drink. There are other things we've made that I like that I would drink this first. That's why I gave it a 6. couldn't see going much higher than that, though.
I bumped it up to the 6.5 just because it is so easy to drink. And I know it's a weird thing to say, but I'm enjoying its lack of complication, where normally I enjoy the complication of a beverage.
Right.
So it's kind of a dichotomy here, right? So I can just drink this and not think about it. I can drink it with food. I can drink it when I'm thirsty. I can drink it when
Yeah, cold, this would be super refreshing, like
Yeah.
after cutting the grass or
Oh, yeah.
working in the yard or
Yeah.
something. This would be great. Maybe not this time of year because it's a little chilly right now. But, you know, ooh, mold. This might be really good.
so many things.
Yeah, there's so much you can
So
do
many
with this.
things.
And that's the beautiful thing about ciders. They're like the starting point for brewing. Many ways you can go with it. Stay tuned. We have a follow-up video where we're going to do some other things to the other bottles of this cider, and we'll let you know how that goes. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.
Bye-bye.
But just suffice to say that a 1.052, I should figure it out before I say that to the camera, because, you know, that makes more sense, right? Yeah.